call for alcoholics. We're running late.
Preamble. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety.
Thank you, Heather. And I've asked Pam to read how it works.
Good morning, I'm Pam and I'm an alcoholic, and this is how it works. Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. Those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to this simple program. Excuse me. Now I lost my place. Usually men and women who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. There are such unfortunates. They are not at fault. They seem to have been born that way. They are naturally incapable of grasping and developing a manner of living which demands rigorous honesty. Their chances are less than average. There are those, too, who suffer from grave emotional and mental disorders, but many of them do recover if they have the capacity to be honest. Our stories disclose in a general way what we used to be like, what happened, and what we are like now. If you have decided you want what we have and are willing to go to any length to get it, then you are ready to take certain steps. At some of these, we balked. We thought we could find an easier, softer way, but we could not. With all the earnestness at our command, we beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. Some of us have tried to hold on to our old ideas, and the result was nil until we let go, absolutely. Remember that we deal with alcohol, cunning, baffling, powerful. Without help, it is too much for us, but there is one who has all power. That one is God. May you find him now. Half measures availed us nothing. We stood at the turning point. We asked his protection and care with complete abandon. Here are the steps we took which are suggested as a program of recovery. Number one, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. Number 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. 6, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. 7, humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. 9, made direct amends to such people, except when to do so would injure them or others. 10, continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood him, praying only for knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out. 12, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all of our affairs. Many of us exclaimed, "What an order, I can't go through with it." Do not be discouraged. No one among us has been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles. We are not saints. The point is that we're willing to grow along spiritual lines. The principles we have set down are guides to progress. We claim spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection. Our description of the alcoholic, the chapter to the agnostic, and our personal ventures before and after make clear 3 pertinent ideas. A, that we were alcoholic and could not manage our own lives. B, that probably no human power could have relieved our alcoholism. And C, that God could and would if he were sought.
Sorry about that. I don't know what happened. And I've asked Royal to read the 12 traditions.
Thanks, Nathan. I'm an alcoholic, and my name is Royal. 12 traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous. 1, our common welfare should come first. Personal recovery depends upon AA unity. 2, for our group purpose, there is but one ultimate authority, a loving God as he may express himself in our group conscience. Our leaders are but trusted servants, they do not govern. 3, the only requirement for AA membership is a desire to stop drinking. 4, each group should be autonomous except in matters affecting other groups or AA as a whole. 5, each group has but one primary purpose, to carry its message to the alcoholic who still suffers. 6, an AA group ought never endorse, finance, or lend the AA name to any related facility or outside enterprise, lest problems of money, property, and prestige divert us from our primary purpose. 7, every AA group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. 8, Alcoholics Anonymous should remain forever non-professional, but our service centers may employ special workers. 9, AA as such ought never be organized, but we may create service boards or committees directly responsible to those they serve. 10, Alcoholics Anonymous has no opinion on outside issues, hence the AA name ought never be drawn to public controversy. 11, our public relations policy is based on attraction rather than a promotion. We need always maintain personal anonymity at the level of press, radio, and films. And 12, anonymity is the spiritual foundation of all our traditions, ever reminding us to place principles before personalities.
Thank you, Royal. And I've asked Rory to read the promises.
Dumbass. My name's Rory, I'm an alcoholic. This is the promises from pages 83 and 84 of the big book. If we are painstaking about this phase of our development, we will be amazed before we are halfway through. We are going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. We will not regret the past, nor wish to shut the door on it. We will comprehend the word serenity, and we will know peace. No matter how far down the scale we have gone, we will see how our experience can benefit others. That feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. We will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. Self-seeking will slip away. Our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. Fear of people and of economic insecurity will leave us. We will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. We will suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. Are these extravagant promises? We think not. They are being fulfilled among us, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly, but they will always materialize if we work for them.
Work. Thank you, Rory. And without further ado, introducing our first speaker of the day, Bill G. from Edmonds with 34 years.
Good morning, Yakima. I'm an alcoholic. My name's Bill. Good to be here. And if any of you guys, if there are a few of you maybe still hurting from that last hangover, I hope today can ruin some of your drinking. It's been a good 3-hour drive getting out here. I am highly caffeinated and ready to go. I want to thank Ashley for inviting me out in the committee. It is always an honor and a privilege to share with Alcoholics Anonymous, the gift that was given to me. And I am an AA cheerleader. I love Alcoholics Anonymous. I didn't used to. Before I got here, I was a pretty critical kind of guy. I thought you guys were weak-willed and really lacked some fortitude to get things done because I was pretty sure I could handle the problems that were overwhelming my life, but that turned out not to be the case. My job here is pretty simple. It is to say, what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. I don't know that I was born an alcoholic. I don't know that I became an alcoholic. I don't know that any of that matters. What I do know is I've come to learn and accept that I have a disease that's mental and physical, that I have this obsession of the mind and an allergy of the body, and one is an unfathomable number. I just don't know what that means. I am blocked by a spiritual solution because I am just consumed with self. All of those things I was just baffled by for all of my life. I didn't know what the problem was. I just thought the solution was right around the corner. The next thing will fix this hole that's deep inside of me, and it never could. I was brought up, my life was a mixture of, my mom was a manic depressive. The multiple fathers I had in my life, they were all alcoholic. I don't know that I inherited that, but I sure picked up some traits. I perceived life a certain way, that I just wasn't enough. I was encouraged to drink early on, but I didn't drink alcoholically. It was just part of life. Everybody sits down with Walt Disney on Sunday night with a bourbon and 7 and a TV dinner. I just thought that's the way kids were brought up, but I still kind of held it together for a good portion of that period. My mom is a manic depressive, kept trying to kill herself, and I took ownership on that. I thought it was something about me, and that I just was doing it wrong. And all the things that were going wrong in my life, I was sexually abused and physically abused, and I always thought there was just, something, I am bringing this on myself. And when she finally succeeded in killing herself, I was 15 and a half. This time, she was in the middle of a divorce with my stepdad, and I was about to begin, I think, my sophomore year in high school, and we were in a new town, and life was supposed to be new and good, and it ended. And that was like a psychic switch. Up to that point, I had kept my life pretty much together, and I was a good student. I was in sports. I was doing all this stuff. But that was like just the psychic switch, and immediately I got deep into the alcohol, got deep into the drugs. By 16, I was addicted to meth. And that just seemed normal. It wasn't like there was something wrong. I remember waking up one morning and not having that stuff that gets me through the day and being startled, but just accepting the fact that, gosh, I wish I was like the other guys that could just go to school and go do their job. But I knew that I knew I needed something in me to make me complete. And so it wasn't a startling thing, it was just acceptance. I OD'd 3 times by the time I was 17. My life was getting out of control. I was couch hopping around. After my mom died, we tried living with my grandparents, and it was okay for my little brother, but I was just out of control, so I was just couch hopping from the time I was 15 and a half. And by 17, I went back to my stepdad and asked him to sign me into the military. Vietnam is just winding down, but that's where I went. And I really excelled there. I did well. Got into a small special warfare unit, deployed for the entire time. And why, like all good alcoholics, we can show you anything for a brief amount of time. It's like a little trick with mirrors. Looks really good, but it doesn't have a lot of substance. And that's how I was in the military. I'm an overachiever and did really good. But if you went to the NCO club, I had a tequila drink named after me, and I'm dealing speed off base. There's just there's just the craziness of my life. Anyway, I got out of the military and still just trying to get it together. I start doing that job hopping thing, I always would quit just short of being fired. But I could always show you a little bit. And I did the same thing, I married this great woman, and based on my potential, her parents were real thrilled with me, but I had a lot of great dreams and sold her on it. We had a little girl and had a new house, and it was just, on the outside looked so great, but man, I just couldn't stop drinking, couldn't stop doing this stuff. And again, just going through that procession of jobs, everybody knows what that's like. And pretty soon, she's the one that's getting me my next job. She's the one that's saying, hey, when we go over to my parents tonight, do you think you can try and not drink so much? And I couldn't, I look at her like she's nagging at me, but I knew I didn't have any answers. That continued on, continued going through the different jobs. Finally, we get this, I'm driving armored trucks, if you can believe that, and which is a great place for a coke addict who has to walk around a store carrying money and a gun out, and I'm so jacked up I can't even speak, and that's really good because we only have 3 minutes and a stop. In fact, this is kind of funny. Kodak had just developed their Polaroid camera, and I was going through a Kmart, and they had a display demonstrating this camera, and I have this picture of me holding a bag of money and my gun and this stupid grin, and my jaws are just jacked. You could see the muscles sticking out. It was really pathetic. One thing about being pretty coked up on a job like that is you move real quick and they're impressed, and so I got promoted to be a assistant manager of this branch. And now I'm not a bar drinker, and the problem with drinking in bars is getting from point A to point B. And I don't know about you, but I drink quick. And so drinking in a bar, it just is impossible. Plus people like, you want to buy a round of drinks? I don't want to buy you a friggin' drink, And you drink too slow. So I drink by myself. I drink and I use by myself. I don't share. I use yours. I'll drink yours, but I don't want to share. So anyway, bar drinking's not real common for me, but they wanted to throw me this promotion party. And being a good alcoholic, I had to check it out first, so I drove to this place, the day before and figured out where I could park so I could get out. I'm kind of driving challenged too, so I knew I had to make that, a good getaway. And so I get there for this party, and my partner there, he goes, "Hey, Bill, give me the keys. We'll get you home." And I go, "No, I got it." Because you know what a pain in the ass that is, going back and getting your car the next day and all that stuff. So I'm always fine by the end of the night. And instead of just going and enjoying this thing, I thought, and just maybe having a few beers, I go right for the tequila and get it on. And I have this brief memory of my partner going, "Let me drive you home, Bill. Let me drive you home." I said, "No, I'm okay." And the next memory was waking up, and I couldn't understand why I couldn't move and I couldn't talk, but there was a highway patrolman sitting next to me, and he goes, "Can you understand me?" And I all I could do was nod, and he's reading me my rights because I had just killed 2 people. And I'd like to say that's where my story of sobriety begins, but that's not. Because I'm an alcoholic, and I was pretty broke up, and busted up physically, so I'm in the hospital. And on the outside, I've had a life of just showing you a whole lot with mirrors. And there were so many people that were just, all they saw about me was those mirrors, that it looked like I had my shit together. And through good lawyers and the fact that MAD hadn't been established back then, I was able to stay home while waiting for trial. And I remember I'm still on crutches, and my wife came home early one day, and I'm sitting there drinking, and she goes, "I can't believe after what happened that you're drinking." And I looked at her with all seriousness, and I said, "Well, it's not like I'm going to get drunk." But I did, because I'm an alcoholic and I can't stop drinking. So, I go to trial, and for the first time, I see pictures of what had happened. I had passed out on the freeway and hit these guys working on a car. I hit them at 70 miles an hour, and I was in a van, and killed 2 of them and wounded a 3rd guy trying to push his friends out of the way. So I went to prison, and I didn't stay sober there either. Because anybody that knows that, who's been locked up, it's not hard to stay loaded in prison. And AA was there. AA would come in, and I would ridicule you guys. I'd ridicule the guys that would be leaving the block to go into those meetings. I go, "You poor, sad sons of bitches," and do what I do. I could go smoke it or get it or crush up those pills and snort it and just staying loaded. So the day I get out, my wife comes and picks me up, and she stayed with me this whole time, but she's had to bring in roommates to support, paying the bills and doing all sorts of things, trying to make life manageable for her and my daughter. She goes, "Bill, I'm leaving you. I stayed with you till you got out, but I'm leaving you. You're not the man I married, nor will you ever be." And I don't know if you've been faced with this as an alcoholic. I don't think I'm unique in this, but I had no argument there. I couldn't say to her in any way, shape, or form that, "Hey, I just had a bad stretch," because I knew deep in my gut, there's no way that I am ever going to reach those dreams I had as a kid, that I'm ever going to become what I really wanted to become. But I didn't know the answer. I didn't know why. And I kept drinking, and it went on with 4 years of just absolute misery. And the only thing I can do now, I'm been through a whole bunch of different DUIs, even after getting out, violated multiple times. I'm now convicted. I've got 7 felonies behind me. And the only thing I can do is be a laborer in a construction company. And so I start there. And being an overachiever, I work my way right up this friggin' company too, because it's owned by a bunch of cokeheads and they understand. And pretty soon I'm running the wood shop for, this finished trim company, and I'm their purchasing agent and having my drugs delivered to the place. And so it doesn't matter. I didn't get here just on a few hints or going, hey, maybe your drinking is out of control. Because by then I'd lost my home, I'd lost my wife, I'd lost my kid. I lost everything that meant anything to me. Nobody wanted anything to do with me. My stepdad, whom I hated, I blamed him on the death of my mom, and every bad thing that happened to me, including going to prison and all that stuff. Had gotten sober 8 years before I ended up getting sober. He never came and preached Alcoholics Anonymous to me. He invited me to Alcoholics Anonymous. He invited me to, come with him, and I go, no way. But it's kind of funny, towards the end of my drinking, I would call him up, because he's talked about this surrender thing and this God thing, and I would argue with him about his higher power. Just trying to find some kind of little chink in his program, because I could just prove that won't work for me either, and he'd never get ruffled, he'd never get rattled, he'd just go, well, Bill, it's just something that works for me. And that's about the extent of it. Other than he did drop off a big book to me. And the funny thing about that big book, it sat in a wire magazine rack in my living room, when I had a living room. And it would just pulsate. I never read that thing, but it would just sit there going ba-boom, ba-boom, ba-boom. Like I knew there was something in there I didn't want to see. I couldn't throw it away. I couldn't hide it. It just sat there. I ended up in a rented room. I no longer could keep an apartment or anything. I was making good money at this construction company, but going through the drugs, going through the drinking, ended up in a rented room. I had cardboard boxes for furniture and a mattress on the floor. Didn't have a driver's license, but I'd still drive to work. In fact, I had gotten pulled over once in a company truck full of all sorts of equipment, and had that impounded, and my boss didn't fire me over that either. But close to when I finally got sober, my dad and my brother came and did an intervention on me. They asked if they could come and speak to me. Now, my brother worked with me. I would see him in the morning when crews would load out, and he was a real alcoholic. He was the kind of guy that he got in an accident once, and he's upside down in a car in an intersection and got arrested for abusing the police, because all they were trying to do was get him cut out of the car and out of there. And his abuse, verbal abuse and physical abuse to the police, got him the arrest, which was like, go, dude. That was the kind of alcoholic I wanted to be, but I was more of the conniving kind. Anyway, my brother got sober, and I saw the change in him. He would come in the morning as the crews loaded out, and his complexion changed, and his eyes started clearing up, and he started getting this laugh in the morning, and I was just dying inside wanting to feel like that again. And he'd talk about doing stuff with you guys. And I go, Rick, that really sounds like fun, Why don't you invite me sometime? And he looked at me real serious, and he go, Bill, I'd love to, but you've got to make a decision. And that was the end of the conversation, because I knew where this was leading. This was something about me not drinking. And so we would just stop there. But anyway, my dad and my brother asked if they could come and talk to me. And I knew what that talk was going to be about. And so I was going to receive them in my place of power, which was my office in this construction company. And in my office, on the wall, were all these community service awards, coach of this and volunteer of the year and all this stuff. Well, the reason I had all these is because I had over 2,000 hours of community service. And when you do 2,000 hours of community service in a place, many people don't know you're a convicted felon. You've got to be there. They go, oh, well, thank you for being here and keeping this program alive, or cleaning up this or whatever, and they give you all these awards. So I've got these all mounted like I really earned them, you know? This, again, this is the mirror thing, you know, this is what I'm pretending to be. So this is where I received them. I had my dad and my brother, and I sat them down, and I sat on my desk with a beer between my legs and all my arrogance, and they started off by saying, you know, Bill, we've had a problem with drinking, and we found a solution. We think you may have that same problem, and we would like to offer some help. And I went on the attack. And I went on to say how weak they were, and how pathetic they were, and how hypocritical they were, and what kind of lives they had, and what they did to me, you know? And sent them on. My brother at this time is just a few months sober, and he is in tears. He is not prepared for this. You know, my dad has a few years sober, and they have, you know, he was ready for this. He's been through this thing. He didn't lose his cool. I just destroyed my brother, which was, you know, great satisfaction to me, and sent him on. Real quickly, when are we supposed to finish up here?
It's 9 or 10, 15. You have an hour?
Oh, boy. Anyway, so let me go on. So they did that intervention, and I sent them on their way. My brother in tears, you know, my dad pretty speechless, but they did what they did. And for the next few months, my drinking was just ruined. You know, you know, when the solution's sitting there and you just drink all the harder at it, you know, and that's what it was. Finally, one day, you know, I didn't pick the day. It was in a blackout. I went into a 3-day blackout. I called the one person that I hated the most in the world, the one person, though, that could do something that I couldn't do, and that was be sober. And I called my dad, and I asked for help. And he came, and he picked me up, and he took me to Pomona Valley Hospital in California, and he walked me into this place. And I went into detox, and they had a 30-day treatment program in-house there. I was in detox for about maybe 3 days, and on the third day in the morning, I'm in my bathrobe and slippers, and I'm sitting by a nurse's station. It's kind of like this, and a couple chairs there, and I was sitting there, head in the hands, woe is me. And this woman, well-dressed woman, walks by. She goes, well, if you're well enough to sit here, you're well enough to go to a meeting. Why don't you come with me? And maybe I wasn't awake enough to refuse, but I just followed her down the hall. And we went into a cafeteria, and there's like 60 well-dressed people in there, laughing and all this clattering and talking. And didn't look like alcoholics to me, but that was my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, sober. Now, I had been to a lot of meetings on court cards, but I was never sober. And I liked your stories, but I was different. This time, I'm walking in sober. The only way I can walk into Alcoholics Anonymous in a bathrobe and paper slippers. It's a little hard to deny I might have a problem. And in that particular kind of meeting there, it was a newcomer meeting. If you were new, you stood up and introduced yourself. And for the first time, I could honestly say when I stood up, my name's Bill and I'm an alcoholic. And by the grace of God and the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, a lot of hard work on my part, I haven't had to have a drink or a drug since then. And that was June 2nd, 1987. So I get chills over that. You know, that was a big deal. And I hope I get to share and you can get the passion that I feel and what I have received from Alcoholics Anonymous in this journey and recovery, and the stuff, just the little life lessons that come from living sober and what happens in this program. So the first thing that started off, one thing that happened in my bottom, in this blackout somewhere, my bottom was absolute. It was complete, it was total for me. And somehow in this blackout, I had this vision like I was stretched out over this abyss. And I could either let go and drop back into my addiction. And I don't think I was going to die. I was pretty sure I was not going to die. I'd already had several near-death experiences in my life through the ODs, through the military, you know. I don't think I'm going to die, but I am going to be one of those kind of guys that you were going to prop up in a mental institution that just, you sit there and wipe the spit off his face every couple hours. That was what I saw my future as. Or I could ask for help. And somewhere in that blackout, I sensed there was something. I don't know what it was, but there was something, and I couldn't deny that. So when I came to here, when I got to show up in my bathrobe and paper slippers, I was pretty sure that higher power you're talking about, that something greater than yourself, there was something there. And I was ready to trust myself for the first time to that. So I could understand, you know, and admit my complete powerlessness. I had no doubt. You know, the thing that had kept me out there for so long was the inability to accept the unmanageability in my life. Because I kept on thinking, you know, just one more change or one more her or the right drink concoction or something would fix it. But that's not the case. I was completely unmanageable. And that got me into the door on pretty firm ground. So getting into the second step, that wasn't a reach for me. My first step was complete and absolute. I totally accepted that. If I am not the answer, something other than me has to be. Step 2 was done, you know. So I get involved in my group. I'm listening to you guys. I'm a great watcher. One thing that happens when you're brought up with a manic depressive in your family is you learn how to watch, and you learn how to change and adapt, because you don't know what you're walking into the room to, because it changes so quick. So you want to be able to be quick on your feet, you know. And so when I come into Alcoholics Anonymous, I'm watching you guys. And I'm watching the people that are sitting in the way back of the room. I'm not judging. But I'm seeing they're disappearing quite a bit, you know. I'm seeing the people that are sitting up close, the people that are getting involved in their group, the people that are making the coffee, that are taking those commitments, that are setting up the chairs. They seem to show up pretty regularly. So I took a chair commitment. I mean, hell, I'm living in the hospital, so it isn't a great stretch for me to get up at 6:45. And if I didn't show up, I knew somebody else would do it. But I mean, I just took it upon me to start setting up chairs in the morning. And you started teaching me how to have conversations. One of the things that happened while I was in that treatment program, the counselors were getting a little concerned, and one of them came up, because I'm not supposed to tell you this, Bill, but they want to commit you when you finish your program here, because they think you are sociopathic. That's how I came here, man. That's so me wanting to do something for you and have conversations with you, that's a big deal. And so I start learning how to be a part of and showing up with some kind of consistency, and I'm learning that from you. And then you promote me to cutting donuts in the morning, and you're giving me a knife, and that's a big deal, you know, so I'm advancing here. Soon you're giving me money to go out and buy donuts as I graduate from this thing, and I start showing up. Now I'm living at a halfway house, you know, and I'm becoming a part of, and that is huge. I get asked to lead this meeting for the first time. And in that meeting format, you have like 15 minutes and you share your experience. And for the first time, I tell other people about me killing these guys. And after the end of the meeting, this husband and wife come up, and they're just bawling. And they come up and they give me a hug, and they go, "Bill, we're so glad you're here." And I'm thinking, like, man, I really touched them. My story was really good. And in my arrogance, my selfish arrogance, come to find out, just a couple months earlier, a drunk driver had killed their son. And yet they're welcoming me because they think, I might have a chance. Suiting up and showing up, becoming a part of, that was huge. In my first year, I start learning the concept of working a program of inconvenience. Back then, we didn't have cell phones. We didn't have the nice, convenient, text my sponsor kind of thing. I had to ride my friggin' bike down to the bowling alley to get to the payphone to call my sponsor. I remember pushing my bike back one time from work and going, I had a literature commitment that night. And for literature commitments, you got to carry all the books and all that stuff. And I remember pushing my bike past the guy that ran the house, this guy named Roland, who's this big, muscle-bound black guy. And I remember going, I've got to go to that effing meeting tonight. And I could hear Roland's neck turn. And he goes, "That effing meeting?" He goes, "The effing meeting that saves your life? Yeah, maybe you better go to that effing meeting." And to this day, when I get that feeling of, I don't want to go to that effing meeting, I hear Roland's neck turn, Yeah. But that's what I learned. It's a program of inconvenience. If AA becomes convenient for me, I start getting complacent. I start forgetting how precious this gift is. I start forgetting how hard-earned my sobriety was. I start forgetting the debt I'm trying to pay back for what I have done, and I start forgetting the value of the gift that I have to pass to somebody else, So I don't want to get complacent. I am so fearful of that. And if you have the opportunity to stick around for a little while, you have, the unfortunate opportunity to go to a lot of funerals. Those people that start getting comfortable in sobriety. There's a lot of different ways to have hangovers. There's a lot of different ways to relapse. I don't think today I'm going to go in and immediately bend at the elbow, but I'm going to start forfeiting my sobriety by compromising my principles. Pretty soon it's a little unresolved lie here or a little nurtured resentment there. And pretty soon the pain starts getting so bad that I've got to cover it up with some other kind of behavior, and pretty soon it's a drink or a drug. I see that so often, and I know I'm quite capable of that, and I don't want to get there. So inconvenience, a program of inconvenience. At a year sober, my brother took me to my first convention when I was 9 months sober. Now I'm living in Pomona, California, and he takes me to a convention in Laughlin, Nevada. First convention I'd ever been to, and it was awesome. There's 4,000 alcoholics there. It was crazy, insane, and it was just so impactful. But something happened when I went there. There was such a draw for me that I knew I wanted to move there. But I was told, no major changes in the first year, so I had to wait for a year to get sober before I moved there. But I went there almost every weekend, going to meetings out there, just so I would feel comfortable and I'd have a place to go. So on my 1-year birthday, I moved out. I didn't move to Laughlin. I moved across the river to Bullhead City in Arizona. With my idea, this is my plan. This is a good alcoholic plan. 1 year sober, and I am going to go move there to be a craps dealer in a casino. I have never played craps. Never worked in a casino. scared the crap out of my dad and my brother, so much so they did a geographic intervention on me. You know, they came up, they showed up one day armed with newspaper clippings of the robberies and the drug addiction and the poor employment and all this stuff there. Yeah, it was funny, but it was just one of those things, you know. I did all the stuff, you know, even my sponsor didn't think this was a great idea, but he goes, if this is happening, this is the way it's gonna, you know, we're gonna work this out, and we're gonna make sure that you've got a place to land and you're prepared. So I did all that, and I had another sponsor lined up out there, did all this stuff. So I go out there and I go to a crap school, you know, so I can go get hired and do all that stuff. Couple great things that immediately happen when you get out to Bullhead City. There are very few meetings at that time in Bullhead City. And the first thing I noticed was, here's this little meeting, and this guy used to be married to her, who's now living with him, who was fired by him, and they're all in the same room because it's the only place to get sober. Now I'm coming from like the LA area where there's hundreds of meetings, and I can create a little wreckage over here and just change meetings and nobody knows, and I'm still looking good and all this stuff. That doesn't fly over in Bullhead City because you're still in the same room. And God put me right in the same place where I quit doing my bullshit of I'm looking good in mirrors and you got me warts and all. If I'm gonna stay sober, it's gotta happen in front of you and with you, you know? Gift, total gift. So I go through this crap school, and now I'm trying to go out and get a job in a casino. Well, my lack of research has failed to divulge to me that in Nevada, if you're a convicted felon and you go to get a job in Nevada, you have to carry a convicted felon card. And you have to present that to all your employers. So everywhere I went to go get a job, I had to show this, and inevitably they're all going, well, what happened? And I've got to explain to them, to everybody, this is what I did. And everybody said, we don't want you here. I go, now what am I gonna do? You know, I've done all this, you know, I've gone through this school, I'm going to meetings, I'm working with guys, I've got service commitments, blah, blah, blah. I'm freaking out with my sponsor. He goes, you're doing everything you're supposed to do, just keep knocking on doors. And finally I ended up in this place. It was Sam's Town at the time, and they said, well, what are you doing now? And I tell them what I'm doing, I tell them about my program of recovery and what I'm trying to do, and then they gave me a shot. So I became a craps dealer, and one thing that happens in casinos back then was you get shifter tickets at the end of your shift. They give you tickets to go get a free drink because they want to keep you in the casino. You know, all your tokes, your tips, they want you to leave them at the casino. And, you know, it was funny. I didn't do that for a little bit. But all these guys, they're all going up and they're all laughing. There's nobody else sober, right, that I knew of at the time. And then I tried going up to the bar with them, just have my 7-Up. I'm supposed to be able to do these things if I'm spiritually fit. And pretty soon I'm watching them having fun that I want to have fun. And you start getting that feeling. And I go, you know, I don't need to be there. So I stopped doing that. Long story short, after a few years, we had a completely sober crap crew, which was a real unique thing in the casino industry. And I always worked swing shift, which is one of the busiest, hottest shifts. So my crap crew was always getting the high rollers. We were always put on the hottest games because they knew they could trust us. It was pretty funny. We could actually, when the conventions would come into town, we would call in well. We told them, hey, there's a convention here. Can we have a couple days and do this? And they gave that to us. You know, so that was pretty awesome. Anyway, good experience. The big thing was, you know, this whole sheriff's card thing. I had to face my past. The next thing that happened is the IRS came down on the casino industry back then. And I had 5 years of no taxes paid. So it was either run or face the music. And they said, face the music, face those, do the next indicated thing. And I went through all my income tax, my financial insecurities with that, faced the IRS, did that stuff. Really grateful about that. Before let me back up a little bit. Before I went to Nevada, I had to do my first inventory. And I don't know about you, but I really had a hard time putting some of that stuff down on paper. I had a lot down, but there was those few things. And if you're really smart, you're going to read ahead. And in the 5th step, it talks about what happens if you don't get all that stuff down on paper. It's the guy who's surprised when he gets drunk. He goes, and it says something like, he thought he got honest, but not to the degree we find it necessary. And I thought, you're reading my mail, man. You're looking, you're listening to my thoughts, because that's exactly what was going on. I was going to tell you everything but this. And the but this is what was going to get me drunk. But how do I get it on paper? I just couldn't get it over that hump. I couldn't talk to my sponsor about it. And then I heard about this 4th step workshop. It's like 60 miles away from my home group. I go, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go there. I'm going to get the secret on how to get this down on paper. It's going to be great. I'm going to drive back to my sponsor. We're going to get this shit done, and I'm going to be free. So I drive 60 miles to this workshop, and here's the first thing I discover. I walk into this room. It's in a cafeteria at this church, and there are all the old members of my home group. Next lesson, that's why they sound the way they sound. They're still doing this deal, So we go through the inventory, and I just go, I threw caution to the wind. Those last few things get down on this paper. I think I'm going to drive those 60 miles back to my sponsor. And in the back of my mind, no, you're not. And then the people that run in the workshop say, well, you know what? We're a little early. Why don't you go ahead and grab somebody, go out on the grounds and do a 5th step? They're saying that not just to me, but to everybody. And I'm thinking, crap. But I also have the awareness that those last few things aren't going to make it back to my sponsor. So I just grab a guy. And here's my next lesson. I grab this guy. We go sit down. He's got a few years sober, and he's explaining to me. He goes, I've done this before. And I go, the way we're going to do this is I'll tell you a little bit of mine, and then you tell me a little bit of yours. And his shit was the exact same as my shit. The animals may have changed, but basically it was all, that's a joke. It was all the same stuff. And there's the lesson. Bill, you are not terminally unique. There is nothing I have been able to come up with in Alcoholics Anonymous that somebody else hasn't done or experienced. And thank God. There's a solution here. I was going to kill myself with uniqueness, that nobody felt like me, did like me, whatever like me. But you are just like me. Thank God. And here so we finished that 5th step, and I went back to my sponsor and shared the exact same stuff with him. And from that time on, I've done 5th steps in coffee shops and anywhere. It doesn't matter anymore. I am not a prisoner of my past. What has happened to me has now become, one of my greatest assets. And it's not that I revel in it or do I suffer from it, but that experience and how I walked through it is of benefit to somebody else. I had a really unique opportunity that helped both me and this other guy. I had a guy, at the time I'm back in California, I'm living inland from Santa Barbara, and this new guy comes in, angry, hurt. His son had been killed by a drunk driver, and he just wanted to kill the guy, and he can't get past this anger. And he had been sharing a few times now in this meeting. And he asked me one day, he goes, Bill, would you be my sponsor? And I go, Joe, well, why don't you come over to my house today and let's talk? And we sat down and I go, Joe, I need to tell you about my past before we go any farther, and then you make your decision. And I told him about my past, that I was that guy that he hated the most, that I had killed these other people. And he looked at me and we talked about it. And I could sit down and talk with somebody that had that anger and had that hurt and had that loss and feel that from him and have him share that with me, and I could share with him the things I feel. We ended up having a relationship for a lot of years. And that was pretty cathartic for both of us, you know. But that wouldn't happen otherwise. I've had the same experience with guys that were abused. You know, I was sexually abused for a long time, and it's funny, I'm surprised at how many fifth steps that is a common thing for a lot of men in Alcoholics Anonymous. One more time, you know, we're not unique. Before I got sober, when I was in that room with the mattress on the floor, in the closet, if you were to open it up, were shopping bags of unopened mail. Now, one more time, it was, you know, pretty soon, like next week, I'm going to get a handle on this life, and then I can open that mail and take care of all that stuff. I couldn't throw that mail away, you know, all the rejection notices or the impound notices or you owe me notices. But one of these days, I'm going to be able to handle that. It never came. But when I got sober, I still had all those bags. And I remember the first time in a meeting that I shared about that, two guys came up to me smiling. They're kind of elbowing each other. And they come up to me after the meeting and go, we had bags. And they helped me walk through that. You don't know how fearful that is, you know, to open that stuff up and to start going into that. It took me years to get over the phobia of open up mail. Isn't that crazy? But I was not unique. So I'm speaking at a conference down in Tacoma a handful of years ago. And the next morning, a girl comes up to me. She goes, can I speak with you? And she goes, can you come out to the lobby? And I walk out there, and she has a laundry basket full of mail. She goes, this is mine. And we sat down and we talked, and we worked up a game plan for her to go back to her sponsor and talk about this. She was a couple years sober and still had this, but just didn't know how to talk to her sponsor or where to begin. She thought she was all by herself, that she had never experienced this, and there was one other person that felt the same thing. You know, we're not unique. We're not unique. She's still sober and opening her mail. You know, how cool is that? The idea of sponsorship and the relationships that come out of that thing has been such a gift to me. And I have sponsored crazy guys and not so crazy guys. And one guy in Arizona, we called him, you know, one shoe Steve. Yeah, he came to Bullhead City and he had just one shoe, but and just kind of living there's a lot of homeless out in Bullhead City because it's comfortable. It's always hot, you know, and you got the river to wash yourself. I lived on the Colorado River there, so there's the river, you know, there's fishing. They can support themselves. You got the casinos with free drinks. Anyway, so Steve came in. Steve was pretty institutionalized. He spent most of his adult life in prisons. He was a big guy. And he had asked me to be his sponsor, and it was the most unlike. We were like Mutt and Jeff, because I'm me, and there's Steve. And Steve started getting it together. He was the best thing he could do. He was like a shot caller in 3 of the penitentiaries in Arizona. He was just that kind of guy. And so when he came out, he was imposing. But with me, he was just a different man. And he would leave our morning meeting. He always had to leave early to get to work. and he'd walk by and he'd kiss me on the head because he knew it just pissed me off. See you, little buddy, and then go out. You know. But we did his fifth step. I had a boat, and we're out on Lake Mojave, and we're sitting out there, and we finished his fifth step, and he put his big hands on my knees, and he goes, "Do you still love me?" How does a man like that, why does it even matter? But we get here, and to have that kind of connection with another human being when we've never felt it before, when we've been able to share those deepest, darkest things that were just tearing us up inside, and still have the opportunity to be welcomed and loved. I mean, how awesome is that, to be part of that whole process? And, you know, my relationship with Steve continued. And then one day he left a morning meeting, and then I left the morning meeting, and I'm driving to work, and I drive by this traffic accident right out there on Highway 95, and it was Steve, got broadsided and killed instantly. But in that time, he was able to make amends for his life. And you know, a funny thing about Steve, when he first got sober, when I first sponsored him, he always carried a gun because there were people after him. And I go, "Steve, you don't have to do that anymore. You're not that part, that's not your life anymore." And he'd always be fighting me about that. I go, "You know, you are what you put out." Anyway, when I took his wife back from the hospital, we went back home, and there's Steve's chair. And there's his meditation books and his glasses and his gun. And he knew he didn't need it, you know? But that was Steve. We had this old guy that showed up in that meeting. This guy was 79 years old. And I'm sitting in the meeting with my sponsor, Ken. And we called him Big Al. He's this little Frenchman, this old man. And he's there, and he's just this gnarled up little guy. He's pretty close to my age now. But anyway, so I'm saying, "Hey, Ken, you know, maybe you ought to offer to sponsor this guy." He goes, "No, I think you ought to sponsor him." Well, I'm in my late 30s now, you know, and what do I have for Al? But I started sponsoring him, and I took him through the steps, and I started getting this relationship with him, and it was phenomenal. And as he got older, he ended up being put into a nursing home because his wife couldn't care for him. I would go up and break him out every week and take him out for coffee, and eventually Al got so old that he was in a wheelchair, and when I'd take him out, he'd ask me to take him to the bathroom. Our relationship was he would ask me to take him and put him on a toilet. And that's just where the depth of that relationship went, you know. And when Al died, I was part of his celebration of life. But it was a relationship that I wouldn't have picked out. And how great, how full, you know, my life was because of Al. Those are just the things that, left to my own devices, I wouldn't have had any of those things. I wouldn't have had the relationship I have with so many of you that I find in service. For decades, I've done H&I. Up here, we call it corrections. And I do that. I'm looking for the guy who's inside who's making jokes at the panels coming in, you know, making jokes at those weak guys that are going to AA. The guys that don't know that there's a solution. I took panels into Lompoc Penitentiary for 15 years. For a long time, my wife and I shared a panel there as a husband and wife, and it was the first healthy relationship many of those guys ever saw. You know, that was pretty cool. I remember inviting my wife out there for the first time to be a speaker. And she goes, and she started off, I don't know what I can tell you guys, because the worst I've ever done is being caught dining and dashing. And they all laughed, and they said, you know, you're welcome here. What you have, we don't have, and that's sobriety. So if you guys, if anybody is hesitant about carrying the message in, you know, to corrections because you don't have that experience, they've got that experience. You don't have to worry about that. What they don't know is how to be sober. They don't know how to do this program of living, both inside and out, you know. I have found fantastic sobriety behind the walls with some real lifers, guys that will never see the outside, and they've got great sobriety. And you think, why? Why would they even bother? But this is a spiritual thing. You know, that spiritual path, our job is to increase that, and it doesn't matter where we are or what happens. So in sobriety, I have been through those deaths. My brother ended up dying. He ended up actually relapsing several times. He found out he had AIDS. He relapsed several times after that. When complication from AIDS hit him so bad, he ended up going into hospice. I left my job and went and lived with him for his last couple months. And that was pretty awesome because my brother and I, to the end, even through sobriety, were like oil and water. You know, we would fight the world together, but when we're together, you know, it was just crazy. And I remember when I showed up on his doorstep, he goes, yeah, right. And we had a beautiful time. But he celebrated 18 years sober before he died. And we were able to leave nothing unsaid. My dad ended up dying sober. You know, it took us 10 years to get a relationship. And we got into business together out in Arizona, doing some property stuff, some property management deals. And he would drive out, and we would get in a fight. He'd come out, and we would immediately clash, and he'd drive all the way back, 8 hours. You know, but thank God for the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, because we didn't give up. And slowly, over a period of 10 years, I finally felt like for the first time I had a father, you know, and he ended up, he was cutting lumber and had a log roll down a hill and break his leg, and he was just going in to have his leg fixed, and he was in the hospital. I thought it wasn't a big deal. I'm not going to fly out there. So I'm talking to him right before he goes in for his operation, because he's just going to have a pin put in and his leg set. And our conversation ended with, I love you, Dad. And he said, I love you, son. And about time, you know, it was time for him to be out of surgery. And so I'm calling the hospital, and I go, can I speak to Jack Gessler? And there was a pause, and they go, 1 moment, please. And I'm on hold, and my wife's phone rang, and it was his sponsee calling, going, hey, your dad just died. But our relationship ended that way. This was the most hated guy. He was the guy, before I got sober and before he got sober, he was promising he was going to die from alcoholism. He was told that if he didn't stop drinking, they were going to cut off his legs. He had phlebitis so bad. But he was determined to drink himself to death. And he goes, you know, I'm going to die soon, and this will all be yours, whatever all that is, you know. And we were going, yeah. And when you saved his life, because he found you, I hated you too. But yet, through the program of Alcoholics Anonymous and the steps of this program, and both of us working, our relationship ended up with him going, I love you, son, and I love you, Dad. I'm going 10:50. I'm sorry. You said 15? Anyway, 12:50. Anyway. My life has been great in sobriety. And I'm going to just tell you one last thing. This is just a quick story. If anybody's struggling with working with this program, I jumped out of airplanes for a long time. And I learned this back in Virginia, and we're flying out of this airstrip in the middle of this huge forest. And when you learn how to jump out of airplanes, you load into a plane a certain way, and that's the way you're going to come out. And we're watching this because there's a girl who's jumping this day. And it's special to see women jumping. So we're down on the ground, and we see her, and she's going to be the first one out. And so the plane goes up, and it comes out, and they cut the engine, and you can hear the jump master go, "Get out," because they're only 1,500 feet up there. They're on a static line. And you hear her scream, "I can't," and the plane charges up, and it comes back around, because nobody else is getting out if she doesn't get out. And it comes back, and you hear, "Get out," and you see this body kind of creep out on the wheel strut and holding on to the wing strut, and you hear the jump master go, "Go, I can't," and the plane charges up, and they pull her back inside. Third time around, they put her out there, and you hear, "Get out," and you see the body go out, and then you go, "Go." And now when you let go, you're supposed to count out loud. And it's not that counting does anything. It's supposed to keep your mind from freezing, So you're checking you're checking things about your chute, and then it opened, and all this stuff. Well, you don't hear any counting from this girl. You just hear this god-awful scream. Just, "Ah!" As this comes out, and the chute opens up, and she comes down. Now everybody's running out to make sure she's okay. And she's up there, and she's just smiling, undoing her chute, and she went up and jumped 3 more times that day. And that's what happens with Alcoholics Anonymous. It's scarier than shit, but you just do it. Thank you, guys, and I'm sorry for keeping you late.
And thank you for allowing me to chair. We will close with the Lord's Prayer. Circle up. Oh, yeah. Oh, it doesn't say that. Circle up. I just go off of this, sorry.
Yes. I- You can sit wherever you, one of those chairs, yeah. There's three. No, you're the only one. So, Dick, the way they're gonna work.
Becca, what we can do if you want is we can push this over and have it more in the middle. Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to double check.
And then we have a mic, a wireless mic that we can set up, and then we also have this one, so everyone can kind of pass it back.
Let's do the wireless. Yeah.
Get two of them, I think.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I know. It's awesome. So.
I got so many birthday pictures. So you sent me one birthday picture yesterday of Augie, and then I got two from Lauren. I know. She's like, well, Giles does take 250 pictures of him.
Every morning, it's like, oh, look at this face. I gotta take 1,000 pictures of it.
Okay, so Giles, this can come off, right?
Yeah, but what we're gonna do is just, we have wireless ones.
Oh, perfect.
So we'll just use that.
Okay.
We just have to make sure there's an on and off switch, that when we're done, we turn it off. So we don't waste the battery. There for now. Yeah.
One of those binders, there are countdown sheets.
Oh, okay, good.
Jeanette had forgot to print it out, but I go, you know what, when I was looking for the binders. Yes. In one of the binders, in towards the back.
Okay, perfect.
There are countdown sheets. So
That said she had those, so it's like, oh.
I know. But yeah. The world is just kind of crazy.
Oh, God, yeah. But it's going.
It's good, yeah. Oh, right here. Look.
Hey,
I think,
yeah.
yep,
Years,
these are
one,
it.
yeah.
So perfect.
Days, awesome. Oh, okay. I'm going to grab some tape so we can hang up that.
Okay. Perfect.
So I don't read like what, like
Oh, who made this up? Oh, wow.
oh, so it is the 30-second.
Okay, perfect. My whole living room is just covered. Who had this made up? I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah, we've had this forever.
Really?
Yeah, it just works out perfectly with.
Oh my God, I didn't know we had that.
When I saw that, I was like, that's perfect.
I'm like, wow, we did it that quick.
No, we've had this for a few years now.
Wow. Want to move the microphone, put it on the piano, or do you want to do it in front? Would it work there? No.
Oh no, it's gonna be passed down.
Oh,
The microphone?
no, we're going to move this and then we're going to hang that up.
Oh,
on the
that,
piano.
yeah.
You got nails you want? Oh, hold on. Might be able to just, yeah, works out perfect. Becky, you wanna-
I just shoot those out. you guys will each have a seat up here. And you guys will have the microphone and each one of you will talk about, yeah, that one. And then you'll talk about your experience and afterwards they'll open up the floor for questions.
Maybe
Yeah.
there can be a mic out there too.
Yeah, what we'll do is, we may just take one of these.
Yeah, because this works too. So if we can move
Because then you can hear the question.
one person,
Right,
can, you
yes.
know, be out there with questions and stuff, and then we can just put this one.
Yeah, which Becca.
What's your name?
My name's Becca. She's
I'm Dick.
Yeah.
And I haven't met this guy either. I want to.